Silver burned like ice and fire at once. Isolde Ravencrest knelt on slate while her wrists shook inside linked silver cuffs, her ankles bound just enough that she could stand, stumble, stand again. The collar at her throat was engraved with old runes used for rogues and rabid wolves, not daughters of founding bloodlines. Every breath scraped. Every heartbeat made the metal bite deeper. Snow blew sideways over the treaty altar, thin and vicious, stinging her cheeks raw. The border stones rose in a circle around her, Ravencrest gray on one side, Blackwood black-veined granite on the other. Like she had already been buried and this was only ceremony. She looked once toward her family. No one met her eyes. Aunt Alara stood straight-backed in morning blue, hands tucked into her sleeves as if she were at a harvest blessing. Her younger brothers were not here at all. Silvermane looked pleased. He descended. Silvermane looked pleased. He descended the altar steps in fur-lined gloves and polished boots, his smile white and careful. Their cousin, heir by technicality, charming in daylight and venom in shadow. He carried the treaty scroll under his arm like a love letter. "Lift your chin," he murmured when he reached her. His hand clamped under her jaw and forced her face up toward the waiting alphas. "Don't embarrass us in front of guests." The silver chain between her wrists rattled when she tried to pull away. "I won't be your scapegoat." His grip tightened until her teeth clicked. "You're not a scapegoat, Isolde, you're a solution." Around them, rival alphas watched from under heavy cloaks, their wolves awake behind their eyes. Neutral packs, border packs, carrion packs that fed on conflict. They had come to witness tribute transfer and decide whether peace would hold. If Blackwood rejected her, blood feud would open again before moonrise. Tobias released her jaw and smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. Then he leaned close enough that his breath warmed her ear. "You should be grateful," he whispered. "Dying in a monster's den is kinder than what happens when people learn who really started this war." Her stomach dropped so hard she thought she might vomit. 3 months ago, a Blackwood envoy had been found torn apart on Ravencrest land. Tobias blamed Blackwood raiders. Blackwood retaliated. Villages burned. 2 border litters were wiped out in one night. And now, while mothers still grieved, the truth was there in his voice like rot under perfume. "You started it. You started all of it." Public dignity again, and raised his voice, public dignity again, and raised his voice so the circle could hear. "By authority of Ravencrest Council, in restitution for blood unjustly spilled, we offer Isolde Ravencrest in living tribute to Alpha King Marcus Blackwood, to hold at his discretion under truce law." A murmur rolled through the gathered wolves. Living tribute, a polite phrase for surrendered body. Tobias pressed a signet ring into ink, then onto parchment. One wet black seal. Done. He turned back to her one final time. "Try to look useful," he said softly. "If he kills you quickly, perhaps I'll send flowers." The escort yanked the chain at her wrists. She rose because she had to. Snow had soaked through her dress hours ago. Her fingers were numb, lips split, shoulder bruised where a guard had slammed her into the wagon wall at dawn when she asked for water. Her wolf had gone silent under silver suppression, reduced to a faint, pained stirring deep in her ribs. They marched her across the border line. Each step felt like walking out of her own skin. Blackwood sentries waited in dark leather and iron, pine wolf insignia stamped into their breastplates. They did not leer. They did not spit. They took custody with clipped professionalism that somehow felt colder than cruelty. One of them checked the treaty seals. Another checked the runes on her collar. A third counted chains like inventory. "Transport to keep," their captain said. "Presentation at Moonbell. Rivals requested witness." Requested witness. As if she were a cask to be opened at table. By dusk they reached a stone outpost beneath Blackwood's inner ridge. Torches guttered green in the wind. She was shoved into a holding chamber with a barred slit for a window and one rough bench bolted to the floor. When she asked for water, a guard slid in a dented tin cup without speaking. She drank, tasted iron, and tried to make her hands stop shaking. Monster, they called him. Marcus Blackwood. Scarred throat. Half feral. Broke a traitor's spine bare-handed in the blood ring. Fed enemies to the winter trees. Some stories contradicted others, but all agreed on one point: he was not merciful. She should have felt only fear. Instead, she felt something worse, being cornered from both sides, sold by her own blood to a king she had been taught to hate, while the true architects of war stood warm and safe behind her. Hours passed. Outside, boots crunched snow. Voices drifted past the door, low, male, amused. Tribute's pretty enough. Pretty dies, same as ugly. Silvermane wants no heirs from her. Heard him say it. Silence. Then a rough laugh. Then why not break her now? Save the monster the trouble. Isolde froze. The latch scraped. Two Ravencrest soldiers, not Blackwood, slipped inside, cloaks damp with snow, wolf emblems hidden beneath travel mud. Tobias's men. Once? Wolfsbane. Panic flashed white once. Wolfsbane. Panic flashed white through her. The broken-nosed one crouched in front of her, smile thin. Don't fight. It'll only hurt. What did he pay you? Her voice came out hoarse. Enough. The second man lifted her chin with brutal fingers. Orders are orders. No pups. No claim. No prophecy line. So it wasn't just exile. It was sterilization. Maybe death. If the Monster King took a barren, poison tribute and she died under his roof, Tobias could call it proof. Blackwood blood destroys. Blackwood cannot hold peace. Fear would do the rest. The man pinched her jaw, trying to force her mouth open. Drink. Something in her snapped. She drove her forehead into his nose. Cartilage crunched. He screamed and dropped the vial. It shattered against stone, wolfsbane stench exploding sharp as lightning. Broken Nose lunged for her chain. Dropped to one knee, kicked backward, heel to the ground. She twisted, slammed both bound fists upward into his throat, and bolted for the door with shackles clanging. He caught the back of her dress. Fabric tore. She dropped to one knee, kicked backward, heel connecting with his kneecap. He buckled. She hit the latch with her shoulder, spilled into the corridor, and ran. Stop her! Torches blurred. Her bare feet slapped freezing stone, then packed dirt, then snow as she crashed through the outpost yard and into dark pines beyond the wall. Branches whipped her face. Frost sliced her lungs. The silver collar dragged at her throat like a hand trying to pull her backward, but terror made speed where strength failed. Behind her came shouts, then the ululating call of hunting wolves. Run! Her mind skidded through choices with brutal clarity. She could try west toward human farms. Too far, no shelter, caught by dawn. She could hide in Ravencrest foothills. Tobias would find her first. She could keep going deeper into Blackwood lands and throw herself at the one person with power enough to expose this: the monster. She veered northeast toward the black ridgeline where the keep lights glowed faint between trees. Snow swallowed her footprints and revealed them in the same breath. Her chain snagged on roots. Once she fell hard enough to split her lip and fill her mouth with copper. Once she heard paws pacing parallel in the dark and thought she was already dead. Twice arrows hissed through branches nearby, warning or near miss she could not tell. By the time dawn thinned the sky to pewter, her legs were shaking uncontrollably. She crested a final slope and nearly sobbed from relief and dread. Blackwood Keep rose from the mountain like it had grown there, basalt walls, ironwood gates, banners bearing the pine wolf sigil snapping in hard wind. Smoke streamed from high chimneys. Spears glinted on the battlements. 2 sentries spotted her at once. Hold! One barked, already knocking an arrow. Isolde lifted her bound hands and staggered forward anyway. Tribute, she gasped. Ravencrest, I need. Her knees gave. She hit snow face first, boots thudded close. Rough hands rolled her over. Someone cursed at the sight of the collar runes. Get the captain, a woman's voice snapped. Now. Everything after that came in fragments, being hauled through gates, heat slamming into her from great hall braziers, rows of watching wolves turning as one, the metallic tang of old blood in stone cracks from a ring inset in the floor. They dragged her to the center and let go. She fell to her knees at the feet of a man seated on a carved blackwood chair that was almost a throne and almost a war seat, depending on who was looking. Marcus Blackwood. He was larger than rumor and more human than rumor, which somehow made him more dangerous. Dark hair pulled back from a face carved by sleepless years, jaw rough with stubble. One ear ragged at the edge where something had torn it long ago. Scars laddered his throat and disappeared beneath his collar, pale against bronze skin, old moon marks that seemed to catch firelight differently than flesh should. His eyes were wolf gold, hard and bright, and absolutely fixed on her. Around the hall stood rival alphas, exactly as Tobias had promised. Witnesses, judges, opportunists. A gray-muzzled alpha to Marcus's right sneered. Your tribute arrives crawling, Blackwood. Reject her, and be done with this farce. Another laughed. Or kill her now. Save paperwork. Isolde tried to speak, to warn him about Tobias. Wolfsbane, forged peace. Anything. But her voice broke into a cough. Marcus rose. The hall quieted like a throat cut clean. He came down from the dais one deliberate step at a time, stopping an arm's length away. He looked at her as if she were both. He looked at her as if she were both salvation and catastrophe. Who put this on her? His voice was low, controlled, more frightening than a shout. No one answered fast enough. He crouched, reached for the collar. Don't move, he said, and it sounded less like command than warning meant for both of them. Silver snapped under his grip with a crack like splitting bone. The moment metal left her skin, the world lurched. Heat streaked up Isolde's spine so suddenly she cried out. Her wolf slammed awake, surging against her ribs in wild recognition. The room tilted, the air changed. She tasted cedar, iron, and storm on her tongue, like a second heartbeat that was not her own. Her pulse synced to something larger, older, terrifyingly intimate. Marcus recoiled as if struck, one hand bracing against the stone pillar beside him. The scars along his throat glowed faintly, silver white under skin. No, he whispered, raw. Not now. She swayed. He caught her before she hit the floor, huge hands shaking, careful as prayer. And every alpha in the hall watched the Monster King hold his enemy tribute like she was the one thing in the world he was afraid to break. A growl started somewhere deep in Marcus's chest. Not loud, not theatrical. Just a low, dangerous vibration that made the braziers seem to dim, and every wolf in the hall remember exactly why no one challenged Blackwood territory without counting their dead first. Isolde couldn't breathe right. His hands were on her, one behind her shoulders, one braced at her waist to keep her upright. And where he touched, heat spread in bright, impossible lines beneath her skin. Not the bite of silver, not panic. Something alive and answering. Her wolf pressed forward so hard she thought her bones might split around it. Cedar, iron, storm. The scent of him crashed through her senses, intimate as a tongue against her pulse. Beneath it, she caught something sharp and aching from him, restraint stretched to breaking. Alpha? Someone said from the edge of the circle, voice too careful. Is this a claim? Marcus didn't look away from her. His eyes had gone fully gold. No, he said, and the word came out rough, almost pained. A different alpha laughed softly. Then reject her. You know what this means? Now Marcus looked up. The laugh died. He rose in one smooth movement, setting Isolde on her feet first, steadying her until she could stand without collapsing. Then he turned, putting his body between her and everyone else. Out, he said. A murmur rippled through the hall. One of the older alphas, broad-shouldered with a white scar over his mouth, bared his teeth. You invited witness, Blackwood. We don't step out because a tribute makes you sentimental. Marcus's wolf bled through in an instant, nails lengthening into black claws, canines dropping, voice dropping with them into thunder. I set out. It wasn't a shout. It was a command that struck like impact. Chairs scraped, cloaks swirled. No one argued twice. The gray-muzzled alpha spat on the stone as he passed. Bond to enemy blood and call it strategy if you like. We'll see whether prophecy spares your throat. Marcus didn't answer him. He stood still until the last of them cleared the doors and the iron bars slammed shut behind them. Only then did he exhale, long and shaking, and turn back to her. Isolde had managed 3 breaths in that time, maybe 4. Her knees still trembled. Her wrists were still shackled. Her dress was torn and stiff with frozen mud, blood, and whatever was left of terror. None of that mattered to the wild thing inside her that had recognized him and now refused to retreat. Marcus took one step toward her, then stopped like he'd hit an invisible chain. Can you hear me? He asked. She swallowed. Yes. His gaze dropped to her wrists. The silver links there smoked faintly where they touched skin. I need to break those. The bond jolted hard enough that her vision blurred for a second. She nodded once. He didn't lunge, didn't seize. He came forward slowly like approaching an injured animal and wrapped both hands around the chain between her cuffs. Muscles flexed in his forearms. The metal screamed and split. The relief was immediate and brutal. Her wolf surged with a shuddering, grateful cry she felt more than heard. Isolde staggered. Marcus caught her elbows, then let go so quickly it looked like it hurt him. Sorry. She stared at him. He was the most feared alpha on the mountain. Men said he ripped traitors apart in the blood ring and fed their bones to ravens. What they think. What they all think. Why what they think. What they all think. Why are you standing over there like I'm made of fire? His jaw tightened. The scars along his throat still glimmered faintly under the hall light. Because you were dragged here in chains, he said. Because bond or no bond, you don't owe me anything. A pulse beat hard at his temple. And because if I take one step too far without your consent, I become exactly what they call me. The words hit harder than the cold ever had. He looked away first, like eye contact itself was too much. Healer! He barked toward the side archway. A Blackwood woman in healer's green appeared almost instantly, accompanied by 2 sentries with downcast eyes. Marcus didn't leave. He just moved to the side and forced his hands behind his back, knuckles whitening. Check her throat for silver burn, he said. And her lungs. She inhaled wolfsbane fumes. The healer went still. Wolfsbane? Isolde dragged in a breath. Ravencrest soldiers, Tobias's men, in the outpost. They tried to force a vial down my throat. Marcus's head snapped toward her. For one heartbeat his face went empty with a kind of fury so complete it looked like winter right before avalanche. Names? He said. I know one by face. Broken nose. The other had a hawk tattoo on his left hand. They came from my cousin. Marcus nodded once. We'll find them. He didn't ask if she was sure. He didn't call her hysterical. He simply believed her. The healer reached for Isolde's collarbone. Isolde flinched on instinct. Marcus's growl returned at once, this time directed at nobody and everybody. Pure threat. He clamped his jaw shut until it passed. Ask before you touch her, he said hoarsely. The healer blinked, then softened. May I? She asked Isolde. Isolde nodded. stunned by the absurdity that this felt like the first permission she'd been granted all day. Minutes later, salve cooled her throat and a wool cloak settled over her shoulders. Marcus finally met her eyes again, and the pull between them went taut, bright, unignorable. It wasn't just heat. It was recognition layered with grief and terror, and something frighteningly like relief. She saw it hit him too. His sharp intake of breath, his pupils widening, his hand flexing once like he wanted to reach and refused. "What's your name when no one is using your title?" she asked quietly. For the first time, something like surprise crossed his face. "Marcus," he said. She nodded. "I'm Isolde." His mouth almost curved. "I know." Their gaze locked and held. The hall disappeared. The ache in her wrists, the ache in her lungs, the years of being told Blackwoods were monsters and Ravencrests were righteous. Everything narrowed to the line between his heartbeat and hers. It felt less like falling and more like standing at the edge of a cliff in a storm, knowing the wind might carry you or break you, and stepping anyway. A sentry cleared his throat from the doorway, hesitant. "My Alpha, where do you want her housed?" Marcus didn't break eye contact when he answered. "East Tower, inner suite. 2 guards I trust. No one enters without her permission." He paused, then added, "Each word iron. Not even me." By the third night, Isolde had learned the sounds of Blackwood Keep, wind clawing the battlements, guard boots changing shifts at moonrise, kitchen workers laughing softly 2 floors down while bread cooled. Wolves shifting in sleep, bones popping, breath deepening, the old feral rhythm of a pack that lived close to the skin. She had also learned the bond didn't sleep. It tugged at odd moments. When Marcus crossed the courtyard below her window, when anger flared somewhere in him like a struck match, when he was close enough that the air itself seemed to lean toward him. He had not entered her rooms once. He sent food. He sent clean clothes in her size without comment. He sent written reports on the outpost investigation, each signed with his name and nothing else. Broken nose caught, hawk tattoo missing. Tobias's men had vanished into mountain dark. That night she woke choking on a memory. Hands on her jaw, bitter green fumes, Tobias whispering gratitude into her ear like a curse. She bolted upright with a cry before she could stop it, sweat cooling fast against her spine. For a few stunned seconds she didn't know where she was. Then came a soft scraping sound just outside her door. Isolde slid from bed, grabbed the fire poker, and eased toward the threshold. Her wolf was alert now, hackles high. She pressed her ear to wood. No voices, no boot scuff. Just scrape, pause, scrape, like blade against grain. She jerked the door open. Marcus sat cross-legged in the corridor, back against the opposite wall, a small knife in his hand and a block of ashwood on his knee. 2 elite sentries stood farther down the hall, pretending very hard not to watch. He looked up immediately, knife lowering. "I'm sorry. Did I wake you?" Isolde blinked. "What are you doing?" His gaze dropped to the crude shape in his palm. It took her a second to recognize it. A tiny wolf, ears too big, paws uneven, tail crooked. "Carving badly," he said. "At my door?" He nodded once. "You cried out." She stared. He could have walked in. Could have claimed concern, authority, bond rights. Could have given any order, and this keep would have obeyed. Instead, he had sat outside on cold stone with a useless little knife and a piece of wood because she had sounded afraid. "You could have entered," she said, before she could stop herself. His expression shuddered. "You did not invite me." The fire poker felt ridiculous in her hands. She set it aside slowly. Marcus turned the carving over, jaw working like he was choosing words with force. "When the bond hit, part of me wanted to tear through every door between us and make sure you were breathing." His voice went low, raw around the edges. That part isn't civilized. I don't reward it. Isolde leaned against the door frame, nightshirt thin against the hall chill. And the civilized part? He gave a humorless huff. Sat out here carving splinters until dawn. Something hot and strange moved through her chest. Not bonfire, not fear. You're the Alpha King, she said. People call you a monster to your face and bow while they say it. Why do you care if I think you're one too? He lifted his eyes to hers, and there was no armor in them this time. Because you were hurt by people who shared your blood, he said. I won't be another hand that takes. Silence stretched. The sentries shifted farther away, tactful enough to vanish into shadow. Marcus held out the wooden wolf awkwardly. For the nightmares. My mother used to carve these for me when storms got bad. Isolde took it. The ashwood was warm from his hand, edges sanded smooth by his thumb. Clumsy, earnest, unthreatening. She turned it over once, then looked back at him. Thank you, she said. His throat bobbed. You should sleep. You should too. A faint, crooked smile touched his mouth and disappeared. I'll stay until sunrise. She should have told him not to. Should have closed the door and rebuilt all the walls she'd spent years mortaring around herself. Instead, she stepped back and left the door open a hand's width. Not an invitation. Not yet. But not refusal either. Weeks later, the council chamber smelled of rain-soaked wool and old grudges. Isolde sat at the right hand of Marcus's war seat, spine straight, palms folded over the slight curve at her lower belly that no one but healer Maera had touched and named aloud. Too early to show, not too early for rumor. The chamber was crowded. Blackwood elders, house heads, border lieutenants, 3 neutral observers. Voices had been civil for exactly 11 minutes. Then Elder Garin, iron-gray and mean-eyed, leaned on his cane and said, If the tribute is carrying, the pup belongs to the pack line, not the mother. The room went very still. Isolde felt every gaze slide to her like knives being weighed. Another elder snorted. Pack line? Call it what it is. A tribute broodmare got lucky. Heat flashed white behind her eyes. Her wolf surged, furious, but she locked her jaw and stayed seated. She had survived Tobias Silvermane. She would not break in front of men who measured women by blood utility. Marcus rose. The chair legs scraped stone with a sound like teeth. His control snapped not all at once but in visible increments, first his shoulders broadening, then claws punching through his fingertips, then the glint of fangs as his lips peeled back. When he spoke, his voice carried 2 tones at once, human and wolf braided into thunder. Say that again. No one moved. Elder Garin tried for dismissive. Alpha, emotions are understandable, but policy must... Marcus slammed one clawed hand onto the council table. Oak split down the middle with a crack that made 2 lieutenants flinch backward. Anyone, he said, each syllable precise, who speaks of my mate or my child as property will answer me in the blood ring at dawn. Silence dropped like a blade. He turned his head slightly, enough to pin each elder in turn with those gold eyes gone near feral. You want precedent? Here it is. Consent is law in my keep. She is not tribute in this chamber. She is Isolde Ravencrest, my mate, and under my protection. The neutral observers looked suddenly fascinated by their own hands. Garin swallowed, Adam's apple jumping. No disrespect intended. Then show respect, Marcus said. He stepped to Isolde's chair and, with hands that still ended in claws, lifted his heavy black cloak from his own shoulders and settled it around hers. The wool held his heat. His scent wrapped her. Cedar, iron, storm, and for once, it felt like shelter instead of threat. Come, he said quietly. She rose on unsteady legs. He didn't touch her waist, didn't steer her. He simply walked beside her as they crossed the chamber, while grown wolves twice her age lowered their eyes and got out of their way. At the door, he paused and looked to Captain Rhea, commander of his elite guard. You and your unit at her rooms, he ordered. No attendance assigned by house vote. I choose the detail. Rhea struck fist to chest. By your word. They moved into the corridor, the chamber doors thudding shut behind them. Only then did Marcus exhale, and she heard how ragged it was. His claws began to retract one by one, blood beaded where nails had split skin. Isolde caught his hand before he could hide it. He stilled. The bond flared at the contact, warm, electric, immediate, but beneath it she felt the tremor in him, the aftermath of holding back violence by sheer will. You shook the table hard enough to break it, she said, because if she spoke about the way her chest hurt, she might not stop. A breath that might have been a laugh ghosted out of him. It was an old table. She looked up at him, really looked. Scars, exhaustion, ferocity, restraint worn like a second skin. Monster, they called him. Monster. While men in polished rings traded women for treaties and called it order. Thank you, she said. His gaze dropped to where her hand still held his. You don't have to thank me for basic decency. Maybe not. She tightened her fingers anyway. I'm still going to. Something changed in his face then. Small, almost imperceptible, but real. Not triumph, not possession. Relief, raw and unbelieving. Isolde released his hand slowly. Not because she wanted distance, because she no longer needed it quite so desperately. Because she no longer needed it quite so desperately. A horn sounded from the outer wall. Once, twice. Then a third long blast that turned every guard in the corridor toward the stairwell. Captain Rhea was already moving when a runner came skidding around the corner, breath smoking in the draft. Truce banner at the south gate, he said. Ravencrest colors. They request formal audience. Isolde went cold under Marcus's cloak. Marcus didn't look at her immediately. His face went still in that particular way she had learned meant calculation, not calm. Who leads it? The runner swallowed. Tobias Silvermane, my alpha. The name struck like old bruises. Marcus's hand flexed once, claws threatening and then gone. How many with him? 6 escort wolves. 1 scribe. 1 healer. Healer? Isolde echoed before she could stop herself. The runner nodded uncertainly. Under white braid, my lady. Says she bears peace tonics for expectant mothers, as courtesy between bloodlines. Courtesy. Isolde tasted bile. Marcus turned to Rhea. Double the gate watch. Search every saddlebag and every person for contraband, especially plant toxins. Rhea's expression tightened. He comes under truce. He'll cry insult. Let him. Marcus looked at Isolde then, and his voice dropped. You do not have to see him. She thought of Tobias's hand under her jaw at the altar. Try to look useful. She thought of wolfsbane shattering on stone, of men saying no pups, no claim. If she hid now, Tobias would call it guilt and fear and weakness, and men would believe him because they preferred that shape of story. I'll be present, she said. Marcus held her gaze for 2 heartbeats too long, reading for cracks. Then you stand beside me. Not behind. The receiving hall filled fast. Blackwood househeads lined the walls in dark leather and iron. Neutral observers who had never found a rumor they disliked lingered by the pillars. Snow melted in dirty rivulets from boots and hems. In the center, under carved wolves and old battle standards, Tobias Silvermane entered smiling like a man stepping into his own feast. He had dressed for contrition. Simple gray cloak, no ceremonial fur, signet ring turned inward as if humility had finally found him. The performance would have been convincing if Isolde had not seen him smile while signing her body into a treaty. Alpha Blackwood. Tobias bowed shallowly. Luna. His eyes flicked to Isolde. Cousin. I come to mend what pride and grief have broken. Marcus remained on the dais, one step below the war seat, so this was audience, not coronation. State your terms. Trade route restoration along the East Ridge, shared patrol schedules before winter, and Tobias spread his hands in practiced openness. Private reconciliation with my cousin, if she permits it. A murmur moved through the chamber. Isolde could feel the bond humming under her skin, alert and sharp. Marcus did not look at her, but she felt the question in him like a held breath. She answered for herself. You may speak in my presence, with witnesses. Tobias's smile did not falter. Of course. He spoke for 20 minutes about stability, unity, sorrow for losses on both sides. He called Marcus formidable and Isolde resilient. He slipped poison into silk, references to delicate maternal stress, to unusual strain of mixed lines, to the burden Isolde carries among strangers. Every phrase plausible, every phrase aimed. When he finished, several elders looked relieved. A few looked impressed. Isolde wanted to tear the room in half. Marcus dismissed the assembly with clipped efficiency and assigned guest quarters in the lower west wing, far from Isolde's rooms, far from healer stores, under guard. Tobias bowed again, all charm. As he passed Isolde, he paused just long enough to murmur without moving his lips. You look almost happy? How expensive? She did not flinch, but her wolf bared its teeth inside her bones. By midnight, Blackwood Keep had changed shape around a single guest. Servants whispered in corners. Counselors suddenly found reasons to cross the West Wing. 2 border captains requested private talks with Tobias for old acquaintance. A Ravencrest scribe began copying treaty drafts before any terms had been approved, as if outcome were already decided. And in the herb passage behind the infirmary, Isolde found proof that Tobias had not come for peace. She had gone looking for Mara to ask about nausea that had worsened since dawn. Instead, she heard Tobias's voice through the half-closed storeroom door, low and pleasant. Not enough to kill her outright. I'm not barbaric. Another voice, female and shaking. If anyone tests the tincture, they won't. It will read as stress response in early carrying. Cramping. Blood. Loss. Coin clinked, heavy. You were paid to be useful, Lisa. Isolde's pulse hammered in her ears. She edged closer, breath shallow. Through the crack she saw Tobias angled in the lantern light, silver at his temples like frost. Opposite him stood one of Myera's junior midwives, barely 20, fingers white around a cloth satchel. Tobias lifted a tiny glass vial. Green liquid caught the light. Wolfsbane. Tomorrow evening, he said, after supper tonic. She drinks, she grieves, and everyone says monster blood could not carry healthy life. Blackwood legitimacy fractures, elders panic, neutral packs seek steadier hands. He smiled, patient as a tutor. I become the steady hand. Lysa's mouth trembled. If she suspects, she won't. She still thinks blood means mercy. Tobias leaned in. And if Blackwood accuses me, I show the letters she sent begging me to come. Concerned cousin, called too late. Tragic. Letters. Isolde's stomach dropped so hard she had to brace a hand to the wall. She hadn't written him once. Tobias recorked the vial and tucked it into Lisa's satchel. Do this, and your brother's debt disappears. Fail, and his creditors find his little den before first snow. He turned toward the door. Isolde moved before thought, slipping back into shadow behind stacked linen crates as he stepped out. His boot heels passed within inches of her hand, cedar soap and cold metal, and that same sweet rot of his scent. When he was gone, she waited 3 breaths and then entered the storeroom. Lisa spun, startled, eyes huge. My lady, Isolde shut the door quietly. Give me the satchel. Tears flooded the younger woman's eyes. Please don't make me choose. You already chose. Isolde held out her hand, steady by force. Now choose again. Lisa hesitated, then thrust the satchel at her and covered her face with both hands as if expecting a blow. Isolde took the weight, felt glass clink inside, and understood with visceral clarity how close death had just stood to her throat. "Tell no one Tobias met you," Isolde said. "If he thinks you broke, he'll run before we can prove anything." Lisa dropped her hands, stunned. "You're not turning me over?" "Not yet." Isolde left with the satchel under her cloak and the old, familiar knowledge blooming sharp in her chest. Tobias was dangerous not because he lied well, but because he knew exactly where fear lived in people and how much coin it took to rent it. Marcus was in the map room when she found him, sleeves rolled, forearms braced on the table over border lines and supply marks. 3 commanders stood around him arguing passes. He looked up once, met her eyes, and whatever he saw there made him dismiss the room in a single word. When they were alone, she set the satchel down and opened it. The vial rolled between them like a tiny green moon. Marcus went very still. "Where?" She told him everything, from the storeroom to the letters to Lisa's brother. By the time she finished, his jaw was locked so tight a muscle jumped near his ear. "I'll have Tobias in irons before dawn," he said. "You can't," she said immediately. "Not yet." His head came up, disbelief edged with anger. "He arranged poison for my mate and child. And if you seize him now, he screams truce violation, destroys the letters into smoke, and every pack afraid of your temper says he was right about the Monster King." She hated how the words tasted. "He wants you to move first." Marcus's hands curled on the table edge until wood creaked. The bond thrummed with his rage, hot enough to make her skin prickle. Then he forced a breath in through his nose and another out. "What are the letters?" "I don't know. He said he has some that make it look like I invited him." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Hurt flickered, there and gone, followed by something harder and steadier. "I know you didn't," he said. 3 words. No fanfare, no interrogation. Marcus nodded once. Decision settling. Marcus nodded once. Decision settling. Rhea can turn his quarters. Too obvious. He'll smell it. Isolde closed the satchel again. "He doesn't guard against me the same way. He still thinks I'm tradable." A dark sound left Marcus's throat. Not quite a growl, not quite agreement. "Then you don't go near him alone," he said. She opened her mouth. He cut her off, quieter. "That is not an order from a king. It is a plea from a male who has seen what your cousin does." Their eyes held. "Fine," she said after a beat. "Not alone." It was almost true. That night, rain replaced snow, drumming on slate and turning the courtyard to black glass. Isolde stood in her chamber in a loose linen shift, one hand pressed low on her abdomen, where a strange flutter had been coming and going all evening like moth wings. Marcus lingered by the hearth, damp hair unbound, shirt half-laced as if he had come from training and forgotten to finish dressing. He had started sleeping in the adjoining room after Tobias's arrival, at her request, never crossing the threshold without asking. "I don't think it's gas," she said, trying and failing not to smile. His brows drew together. "Should I fetch Myra?" "Maybe in a minute." She took his wrist and guided his hand to the small curve of her belly. "Just wait." The bond tightened, bright and listening. For several breaths nothing happened. Marcus's expression shifted toward apology. Then a tiny, unmistakable thump tapped against his palm from within. Marcus froze. Another kick, stronger this time. His inhale hitched so sharply it hurt her to hear. He sank to his knees in front of her without looking away, scarred ear pressing reverently to her stomach as if listening at a temple door. His big hands spread across her hips, careful, asking even in touch. When the baby moved again, he made a broken sound, half laugh, half sob. Tears slipped down his face silently, tracking over old scars before dripping warm against her skin. Isolde threaded her fingers into his hair, heart splitting wide. Marcus. He shook his head once, unable to speak. Laughed again, choked and disbelieving, and kissed the place where life had just struck his palm. When he finally looked up, his eyes were bright gold and wrecked open. "No one," he said hoarsely, "has ever trusted me with something this fragile." The confession hit deeper than any vow. She cupped his face in both hands, thumbs rough over stubble. "I do." Rain hammered harder against the windows. Firelight moved over his throat scars, over the tenderness in his mouth, over the sheer awe that had replaced rage for one unguarded minute. She bent and rested her forehead to his. His hands tightened, not possessive, anchoring. For the first time since the border altar, Isolde let herself lean fully into the bond without searching for the trap hidden inside it. There wasn't one. There was only him, kneeling, weeping, reverent in a way no one had ever been with her body before. Her walls did not crumble in one dramatic collapse. They opened like gates, hinge by hinge. By dawn, the first forged letter arrived. Rhea intercepted it from Tobias's scribe, wax-stamped with Ravencrest Grey and Isolde's old household mark. Inside, in a hand unnervingly close to hers, were lines requesting private aid from Tobias because Marcus could not be trusted with maternal decisions. A second letter surfaced by noon in Elder Garen's possession, implying Isolde feared Blackwood instability around the heir. A third reached Marcus directly, delivered by a kitchen boy who swore a maid paid him silver to carry it. That one suggested Isolde wanted Tobias to witness any birthing negotiations, to protect Ravencrest blood rights. Poison, but this time for reputation. Marcus handed each letter to Isolde without comment. No accusation, no demand, but she could feel the strain winding tighter through the keep as copies spread like sparks in dry grass. By evening, 2 neutral observers requested clarification on succession law. Garen asked whether Blackwood had legal authority if the mother's natal house disputed paternity under stress. Then Myra went missing, not gone from the West Wing. Pressure became weather, everywhere, inescapable. Then Myra went missing, not gone from the keep, gone from her post. Last seen heading to the lower kitchens. Never arrived. In her place, a message came to Isolde's rooms from infirmary staff. Evening tonic delayed. Junior midwife Lisa would bring it personally. Isolde stood very still in the middle of her chamber, rainlight bleeding gray across the floor. Marcus had been called to the outer training yard by report of a border scout fight. Urgent, bloody, impossible to ignore. Rhea had gone with him. Too neat. A knock sounded, not at her outer door. At the private side passage used by healers. 3 soft taps. Pause. 2 more. Isolde moved silently to the wall niche and drew the narrow silver-tipped spear Marcus had insisted remain in her room, for drills. Her pulse thudded in her throat. Another knock, accompanied by a timid voice. "My lady?" "Tonic from Maera." Behind the door, another scent threaded under lavender oil and boiled herbs. Bitter green, wolfsbane, and beneath it, faint but unmistakable, Tobias's cologne, sweet and cold as winter apples left to rot. Isolde tightened her grip on the spear shaft and stepped toward the latch as the handle began, slowly, to turn. Isolde tightened her grip on the spear shaft and stepped toward the latch as the handle began, slowly, to turn. The door opened inward on Lisa's frightened face, and Tobias behind her, one hand hidden in his cloak, smile mild as milk. "My dearest cousin," he said softly, "you look pale. Stress is so dangerous this early." Lisa held a tray with a ceramic cup. Her fingers shook so hard the spoon rattled against the rim. Bitter green rose under steam. Isolde did not lower the spear. "Where is Mara?" Tobias clicked his tongue. "Always suspicious. She's resting. You should too. His eyes dropped to the spear and amusement flashed. Will you stab a healer now? Is that what Blackwood teaches? From the corridor behind him, two shadows detached from the wall. His escort wolves, supposedly disarmed under truce. One had silver-threaded cord wrapped around his fist. The other held a folded cloth already damp with something sharp that burned Isolde's nose. Wolfsbane and Dreamroot. Trap. Lisa whispered, "I'm sorry," and stepped back so fast the tray tipped. The cup shattered, green liquid hissing on stone. Tobias moved. He lunged through the doorway with shocking speed, cloak flaring, hidden hand coming up with a short blade no longer than a palm. Silver-edged, illegal in truce quarters and perfect for shallow, deniable cuts. Isolde drove the spear forward on instinct. Tobias twisted. The tip scored his sleeve and bit flesh. He hissed, backhanded the shaft aside, and slammed her into the wall hard enough to rattle her teeth. Still feral, he breathed in her ear. I tried to do this cleanly. The wolf with the silver cord came in from the left. Isolde dropped her weight, kicked the back of his knee, and spun. The cord whipped past her throat and caught on the bedpost instead, smoking where silver touched carved wood. The second wolf thrust the soaked cloth toward her mouth. She rammed the spear butt into his sternum. He staggered. Tobias seized her wrist, nails digging, trying to force the blade into her own forearm. "Cut yourself," he snarled quietly. "Convulse. Let everyone watch the Monster King lose his air." Isolde smashed her forehead into his nose again. He cursed, grip loosening. She tore free and drove her elbow into his ribs. Pain shot down her side as his knife sliced a line across her upper arm, hot, then cold. Blood slicked her sleeve. The room exploded into movement, Lisa screaming, one wolf shifting halfway with a crack of bone, Tobias grabbing for her hair, Isolde wrenching the spear free of tangled cord and swinging blind toward the door. The spear tip struck the wall inches from Lisa's throat. Lisa dropped to her knees, sobbing. "Don't, please, out!" Isolde shouted at her. For once, the girl obeyed. She bolted into the corridor. Tobias wiped blood from his split nose, smile gone. "You think anyone will believe you? You invited me. You begged me to help when Blackwood turned unstable. I wrote no letters. You didn't need to." He tapped his temple. "I have your hand now." A roar split the corridor below. Guards, running boots, someone shouting the alarm. Tobias heard it too and changed tactics in an instant. He stepped backward toward the side passage and pitched his voice louder, theatrical panic. "She's bleeding! Gods! She attacked us!" Isolde threw the broken cup shard at his face. He jerked away, and she slammed the door between them, dropped the inner bar, and braced her body against it as fists pounded from outside. "Open this door!" Tobias barked, all cousinly concern for the hall. "She's hysterical. She needs a healer." The lie hit her like acid because he did it so easily. She looked at the spreading blood on her sleeve, at the spear in her hand, at the smashed tonic steaming green on her floor. If she waited, he would shape this before she could speak. If Marcus came first, Tobias would make it alpha rage versus diplomatic guest. No. Not this time. Isolde grabbed her cloak, wrapped her bleeding arm in a strip ripped from the bedsheet, and slipped through the hidden servant's panel behind her wardrobe, the one Mayera had shown her for fire drills. The passage was narrow, damp, and black as a throat. She moved by memory, breath harsh in her ears, while Tobias's voice echoed faintly through stone like a sermon. She turned west. Rain drummed on slate. She turned west. Rain drummed on slate above the hidden corridor as Isolde counted doors by touch. Third iron brace, broken mortar seam, vent slit with cold draft. Tobias's quarters sat directly overhead. She slid a hairpin from her braid and worked the maintenance latch until it clicked. The panel gave just enough for her to squeeze through into a dark antechamber lined with travel trunks and drying cloaks. His scent saturated everything. She moved fast, desk first. Ink, treaty drafts, blank parchment with Ravencrest wax. A stack of letters in her forged hand tied with gray ribbon. She stuffed them under her cloak. Chest by the hearth. Shirts, gloves, coin pouch. False bottom beneath the shirts. Exactly where Tobias always hid what mattered when they were children playing at spies in her aunt's cellar. Her fingers found the notch. The board lifted. Inside lay a leather ledger, a velvet ring box, and 3 vials wrapped in wool. One was empty, one half full green, one clear. Bribes, names, dates. She flipped a page with shaking fingers. Lisa. Debt settled upon compliance. Outpost pair. Advance for fertility correction. Garen aid. Delivery fee for correspondence placement. Hawkmark Jarek. Bonus for silence. Her breath went thin. She took the ledger and ring box. The signet inside bore Tobias's wolf and crescent seal, edge stained with fresh black wax. Boots sounded in the outer hall. Too close. Isolde killed the lamp and slid behind the wardrobe, just as Tobias stormed in with 1 escort and a limping steward. "Search!" Tobias snapped. "She can't have gone far." The escort sniffed, eyes narrowing as his wolf pushed forward. "Blood scent here." Isolde pressed her wounded arm hard against her belly to muffle the drip. Her lungs burned from not breathing. Tobias crossed to the desk, rifled papers, swore. "Ledger's gone. Blackwood guards are sealing the wing," the steward whispered. Alpha returned. For the first time, panic cracked Tobias's composure. "Get me to the lower stables, now." He turned, and as he did, his cloak hem brushed the wardrobe where Isolde hid. His signet hand passed inches from her face. She struck. She drove the spear butt through the wardrobe slats into his wrist. Bone cracked. Tobias screamed, dropping the small key he'd been clutching. Isolde surged out, snatched the key and, with her free hand, ripped his signet ring straight off his finger before he could close his fist. He backhanded her, stars bursting across her vision. The escort lunged. Isolde ducked under him, slammed the antechamber panel open with her shoulder, and dove into the servants' passage. Behind her, Tobias roared, "After her! Kill her if you must!" Kill her. So much for truce. She ran blind through dark tunnels, blood slick in her palm around the ring, ledger thumping against her ribs. Twice she nearly fell. Once a hand caught her cloak and she tore free, leaving cloth behind. She burst out not into safety, but into the open moon court, an old stone circle sunken below the main hall, where formal oaths were judged under sky. Tonight it was lit. Full moon hung between racing clouds. Alphas and elders were already gathering, dragged from dinner by alarm bells and rumor. Marcus stood at the ring's edge, rain on his shoulders, fury like a storm front. Every eye swung to Isolde as she stumbled down the steps alone, blood on her sleeve, Tobias's seal clenched in her fist. She could have run to Marcus. Instead, she stepped into the center of the oath ring and raised her voice. "Moon Tribunal," she called, the words ringing off wet stone. "By Ravencrest blood right and Blackwood mate right, I invoke challenge." Gasps cut through the court. Marcus moved, stopped when she lifted one shaking hand toward him without looking. Not yet. Tobias appeared at the top of the steps, nose bloodied, wrist hanging wrong, expression already rearranging into injured dignity. "Cousin," he said breathlessly. "Thank the gods. She's delirious from blood loss. She attacked under stress." "Step into the ring," Isolde said, "or forfeit claim before every alpha present." The oath stones under her feet began to glow, faint blue-white veins waking in old granite. Tobias's smile thinned. He stepped down. Oath fire rose from the circle's carved channels as soon as Tobias crossed the line, a low silver flame that gave no heat but made lies hurt like iron in marrow. Rain hissed through it and turned to steam. Tribunal law was older than any pack crown. Speak false under moon witness. And the magic answered immediately. No priest, no judge, no bribed elder between truth and consequence. Isolde stood straight despite the blood soaking her bandage. Tobias faced her with his good hand hidden in his sleeve and murder in his eyes. Elder Garin, pale beneath his beard, took the post as formal witness. State accusation. Isolde lifted the satchel vial first. Attempted poisoning of a carrying Luna by wolfsbane tincture through bribed midwife Lisa Thorne. Murmurs broke hard around the ring. Tobias scoffed. Paranoia. She's unstable. Oathfire flicked and struck his calf like a lash. He flinched, teeth bared. First lie. Isolde did not pause. She held up the ledger. Conspiracy to induce miscarriage and blame Blackwood blood for political fracture. Bribes paid to named conspirators, including outpost assailants and council contacts. Tobias laughed through the pain. A forged account book. Convenient. Flames snapped across his shoulder this time, leaving a glowing welt through wet cloth. He hissed. Second lie. Marcus stood rigid at the ring's boundary, claws flexing and retracting, eyes locked on Isolde. He did not enter. She pulled the ring box from her cloak, opened it, and held Tobias's signet up so moonlight caught the engraved wolf crescent. Forgery and distribution of letters under my name to fabricate invitation and sow distrust between mates. Tobias snarled, You stole from my quarters. Did I? Isolde tossed him the signet. He caught it reflexively with his injured hand and cried out as oath fire surged up his arm, runes flaring along his skin where the stolen seal answered ownership. The signet fell, clattering at his feet. Third lie. The court erupted. Voices, curses, stunned laughter. Garin slammed his staff for silence. Call witness, he barked. Isolde turned toward the outer steps. Lisa Thorne, come forward. No one moved. Then from the shadows near the infirmary arch, Lisa stumbled out between two Blackwood guards, Mara beside her with bruises on her wrists and fury in her face. Captain Rhea followed, jaw set. Mara pointed straight at Tobias. He had me locked in cold storage with my mouth bound. Said I was overworked and needed rest. Lisa dropped to her knees at the ring edge, sobbing openly. He threatened my brother. He gave me the vial. He said just enough to cramp that no one would know. She looked at Isolde, wrecked. I am sorry. I am so sorry. Tobias spat blood. Weak little coward. Oathfire struck him full across the chest. He screamed. Runes blazed through torn shirt and skin, jagged silver script branding themselves over his sternum. Oathbreaker, liar, kinseller. He dropped to one knee, panting, then looked up with pure hate. You think this saves you? You were born to be traded, cousin. The words landed in the exact old wound. Isolde stepped forward until the spear tip touched the hollow at his throat. No, she said, voice steady as steel. I was born to choose. Tobias moved then. Not words, action. He shifted mid-lunge, bones cracking, jaw elongating, wolf surging out of skin and cloth in a spray of blood and rain, aiming for her neck before the shift fully settled. Marcus roared and launched from the boundary. Isolde was faster. She pivoted left, planted, and drove the silver-tipped spear with both hands into Tobias's shoulder as he came through the leap. The tip punched through muscle and pinned him to the tribunal post behind him with a wet, splintering thunk. Wolf Tobias howled, half-shift collapsing back to human around the wound, body convulsing as silver burned. Marcus skidded to a stop 1 pace from Isolde, chest heaving, eyes blazing. He looked at her first, not Tobias, making sure she was upright, breathing, still hers. She reached down, took Tobias's fallen signet from the bloody stone, and held it up for all to see. By pack law, she said, voice carrying over his groans, I present forfeited seal from an oath-broken heir. Tobias Silvermane is stripped of Ravencrest rank, rights, and name protection. Garen swallowed hard. Sentence? Isolde met Tobias's fever-bright eyes. Killing would be easy. Ending would be cleaner in blood. She thought of every woman called tribute, every girl told she was coin. Exile beyond the ash border, she said. Wolf mark visible, no pack shelter, no claim. Tobias spat at her boots. I'll come back. Marcus's voice rolled out like distant thunder. Cross my border marked, and you die before your second step. Tribunal stones flared in assent. Rhea's guards hauled Tobias free of the spear with a scream and chained him in iron. The runes on his chest burned brighter as they dragged him up the steps into rain and dark. He did not look powerful then. He looked small. And for the first time since the altar, Isolde felt the chain around her life break. Much later, after healers stitched her arm and Mara bullied her into broth and sleep she could not manage, Isolde slipped out to the Moonwell. Blackwood's Moonwell sat in a ring of standing stones above the keep, fed by an underground spring that glowed faintly with reflected sky. Night wind smelled of wet pine and lightning. The full moon hung low and bright enough to silver every scar on Marcus's throat when he stepped from between the stones. He stopped 3 paces away, as if the distance itself were a question. You should be in bed, he said, voice rough. So should you. A tired, helpless huff escaped him. Then silence stretched, alive with everything they had not said in front of court and blood. Marcus looked down at his hands. When he lunged, every instinct I have wanted to tear him apart before he touched you. I know. I didn't move because you told me not to. He swallowed. You were magnificent. Terrifying. I am still shaking. She smiled despite the ache in her arm. I noticed. His gaze lifted, gold threaded with something vulnerable enough to undo her. Prophecy said my mate would carry the child that unites packs or drowns them in blood. Tonight you stood in blood and chose law over vengeance. You rewrote the damned thing. He took 1 step closer, then stopped again. But I need to ask before anything else. He bowed his head. Not king to subject, but male to female, equal offering. Do you still want me? He said quietly. After all of this? Not bond pressure. Not duty. You. The wind went still. Isolde crossed the last steps and laid her palm to his scarred throat, where old moon marks caught light. Stop, and I stop, he murmured. I know. Stop and I stop, he murmured. I know. He bent slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and brushed his mouth to the curve where her neck met shoulder. Soft first, breath warm, lips reverent. The bond tightened, humming under her skin. Her wolf rose, not in fear this time, but hunger and recognition and home. Marcus's teeth grazed the mating point. Mine, he whispered against her skin, the word shaken. Yours, she breathed. Mate. He bit. Pain flashed bright and sharp, a clean puncture that arced down her spine like lightning striking water. She gasped and clutched his shoulders. For 1 fierce second it burned. Then heat flooded through the wound, molten and sweet, pain transforming into pulsing pleasure that spread through chest, belly, thighs, all the way to her fingertips. The world narrowed to his mouth on her skin and the bond pouring hot white between them. Images slammed through the link as it sealed. Marcus outside her door carving a crooked wolf. His tears against her stomach at the baby's kick. Her voice in the ring saying, I was born to choose. His wolf curling around hers in an endless winter forest that suddenly had dawn at the edge. He made a broken sound and held her as if anchoring in a storm. When he pulled back, blood jeweled at the mark on her shoulder, already silvering at the edges with pack magic. His forehead fell to hers, breath ragged. Yours, he said again, hoarse, if you'll have me. She answered by sliding her hand behind his neck and guiding him down. not gentle this time, fierce. She kissed him once, tasting rain and salt and the wild cedar of him, then turned his head to bare the scarred line of his throat. His entire body went still. Isolde, mine, she whispered. She bit over the oldest moon scar. His knees nearly buckled. He caught himself on the stone beside her with a strangled groan as the return mark took. Blood and power and pleasure detonating through the bond in a white gold surge so intense she saw stars behind closed eyes. His wolf howled in her mind, not rage, exultation. Her own answered, twining. The completion hit like twin heartbeats snapping into the same rhythm. Warmth settled low in her abdomen around their child, protective and bright. The constant edge of distance she had carried since the altar dissolved. No leash, no cage. A chosen tether, flexible and fierce. Marcus shook under her hands, laughing once in disbelief, as tears stood in his eyes again. Gods! She licked the blood from his throat, felt him shudder, then pressed her mouth to his. He kissed her like gratitude and hunger and reverence all at once, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other splayed protectively over her lower back. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his brow to hers and whispered the vow from the hall, made holy now. No fate above your choice. She touched the fresh mark on his throat, then her own shoulder. Then choose me every day. Every day, he said. Mine. Yours, she answered. Mate, they said together, and the moonwell water rippled as if the stones themselves had heard. He gathered her into his arms and simply held her there in the wind, rocking once, twice, until their breathing matched the settled pulse of the completed bond. Morning came clear and cold, storm washed from the sky. The great hall filled before noon for formal reckoning. Banners of Blackwood and Ravencrest hung side by side above the dais for the first time in living memory. Pine wolf black and silver crescent gray, no longer facing off like bared teeth. Isolde stood on the central steps in deep green trimmed with iron thread, mating mark visible at her shoulder by her own choice. Marcus stood beside her in dark leathers, matching mark vivid at his throat. Neither hid. At the foot of the dais, Tobias knelt in chains between two wardens, chest branded in silver runes that would not fade. He looked older by years in one night. Garin read sentence with a voice that shook only once. Tobias Silvermane, found oathbreaker by moon witness, is stripped of rank, lands, and blood claim. Exile beyond ash border at dusk. Any pack granting him shelter shares his mark. Tobias laughed weakly. You hand kingdoms to a broodmare and a beast. Marcus didn't move. Isolde stepped down one stair so her voice met Tobias at eye level. No, she said, we end the trade. She turned to the assembly and lifted the new charter scroll Mara had drafted through the night, while swearing creatively at every elder who argued commas. Read it, Isolde said. Rhea read aloud, clear as bell. Tribute brides outlawed in all allied territories. Mating and marriage valid only by witnessed consent. Children not claimable as pack property against a living parent's will. Joint council seats for Blackwood and Ravencrest under Luna Queen and Alpha King authority. No one cheered at first. It was too new, too sharp. Then Maera struck fist to chest. Rhea followed. One by one, captains, then elders, then the neutral observers bowed their heads and repeated, by moon witness. Garin stepped forward last, eyes on Isolde. Luna Queen, he said, the title awkward but sincere. I spoke dishonor in council. I submit blood fine. Isolde considered him, then shook her head. Keep your blood. Spend it enforcing this law. He bowed lower. Lisa stood near the healer's bench, pale and wrung out, her brother beside her with wrists newly unbound. When Isolde met her eyes, Lisa whispered, Thank you, like she still didn't understand mercy. Earn it, Isolde said, not unkindly. Train under Mara. No more secrets. Mara snorted. She'll scrub bedpans for a month first. By dusk, Tobias was marched through the ash gate with his chest brand bare to every sentry on the wall. He did not look back. That night, the hall held a smaller gathering. No spectacle, just pack and bread and the exhausted relief of people who had expected war and gotten terms instead. Marcus sat in council chair. Isolde sat beside him, not as tribute, not as guest, but as recognized Luna Queen and Ravencrest heir in her own right. Rhea brought final seal wax. Garen pressed his thumbprint under the charter. Mara stole 2 honey cakes and pretended innocence. Under the table, Isolde felt a tiny thump against her palm. She went still, then smiled and caught Marcus's hand, guiding it to the place. There, another kick, quick and certain. Marcus's fierce face folded open. His eyes glassed immediately, unashamed. A tear slid down into his beard as he laughed once under his breath, astonished all over again. Around them, hardened warriors found urgent reasons to study rafters, goblets, boots, anywhere but their Alpha King openly crying because his child kicked. Isolde leaned into him, shoulder to shoulder, marks warm against skin. Their future wasn't fear-proof. Prophecy hadn't vanished. Pacts would argue, winter would bite, old enemies would test new laws. But the chain had changed hands. Chosen, not forced. Marked, not owned. Loved, fiercely, in full view of the world.